Hello, friends. Welcome to Storycraft. On this channel, you will enjoy world top stories. Let's view the video. Germanicus, Rome's tragic warrior prince, the golden heir of Rome. He was born into greatness. In 15 BCE, on the banks of the river Rhone in Gaul, a child entered the world whose blood carried the weight of Rome's destiny. Germanicus, Julius, Caesar, his very name echoed legacy. On one side, he was the grandson of Mark Antony. On the other, connected to Augustus himself. Power flowed through his veins like the Tiber through Rome. From an early age, Germanicus was molded into the ideal Roman, taught to speak with eloquence, lead with discipline, and live with honor. While other boys played with wooden swords, Germanicus studied Caesar's commentaries. He learned not just how to command, but how to inspire. The people loved him. They saw in him a new golden age, a man who could unite Rome's fractured elite and bring dignity back to the empire. The Senate praised his intelligence. The soldiers admired his courage. And Augustus, he saw a future emperor. But standing between Germanicus and the throne was Tiberius. Tiberius was older, colder, and chosen by necessity, not affection. Augustus, knowing the people would never embrace Tiberius's grim demeanor, forced him to adopt Germanicus to secure the succession. It was a masterstroke and a curse. From that moment, Germanicus was both a son and a threat. At 20, Germanicus married Agrippina the Elder, Augustus's granddaughter. It was not merely a political union. They loved each other fiercely. Together, they had 9 children, including a boy who would one day become Emperor Caligula. As Germanicus rose through the ranks of command, he became the living embodiment of Roman virtue, brave in battle, fair in judgment, and kind in soul. His soldiers followed him not because they had to, but because they wanted to. When he walked among them, they didn't see a noble. They saw a brother. But in Rome, brightness casts long shadows. Every honor Germanicus received made Tiberius more uneasy. Every victory in the provinces made the emperor more suspicious. Whispers began to spread. Was Germanicus too popular? Was he building a power base? Could he one day challenge the throne? Germanicus, ever loyal, ignored the rumors. He didn't crave power. He craved Rome's glory. He lived not for ambition but for duty, and that made him even more dangerous. The people worshipped him. Poets called him the darling of the gods. Children sang songs of his valor. Statues rose in his image before he was 30. And all the while, Tiberius watched from his marble palace, smiling with lips, but not with eyes. Germanicus stood on the edge of greatness, loved by the people, feared by the throne. A man destined to rule, but doomed by his own virtue. Rome had found its golden prince, and Rome would never forgive him for it. Conqueror of the Teutoburg revenge. The trees of Teutoburg still whispered, Roman screams. In 9 AD, 3 entire Roman legions had been wiped from existence in the dark German forests. Led into a trap by Arminius, a chieftain once trained by Rome, the legions were ambushed, butchered, and left to rot. The eagles of Rome, sacred symbols of the legions, were taken. It was a wound that never healed, a disgrace that haunted every Roman general. until Germanicus. In 14 AD, Germanicus crossed the Rhine with one goal: vengeance. Not just for Rome's honor, but for every man who had died screaming in that cursed forest. He led 6 legions into the wild heart of Germania, where no Roman dared linger. He didn't just want victory, he wanted redemption. His arrival was thunder. He struck quickly, decisively. Forts were burned, villages razed, and Arminius's allies scattered before him. In battle, Germanicus was relentless. He charged on, horseback, sword raised, fighting among his men. They followed him not as a general, but as a living symbol of vengeance. His presence turned fear into fury. In the plains of Idistaviso and the forest of the Weser, Germanicus crushed Arminius's forces. Arminius, once the ghost who haunted Rome, now fled with wounds on his back. Germanicus recovered 2 of the 3 lost eagles, tearing them from enemy shrines, holding them high for Rome to see. The legions roared, and the wind carried their cries across the forests. But Germanicus didn't just reclaim steel, he reclaimed souls. He led his soldiers to the site of the Teutoburg massacre. Bones still littered the soil, skulls were mounted on trees, spears rusted beside the torn banners of Rome. The ground was soaked in ancient blood. Germanicus ordered the remains of the fallen buried with honor. No conquest, no parade, just silence and tears. There, under the gray sky, Germanicus addressed his legions. They stood in rows, many with tears streaking down their dirt-covered faces. Together they lit fires for the dead, saluted the fallen, and vowed that their brothers would never be forgotten. But not everyone celebrated. From Rome, Tiberius watched with clenched fists. Germanicus's victories thrilled the people. Statues rose, poems were written, songs were sung. Whispers began again. This is the man who should rule, not Tiberius. And so, the order came. Germanicus was to return. The campaign was over. Victory had been achieved, the emperor claimed, but Germanicus knew better. It wasn't about military strategy, it was about political survival. He obeyed. He crossed the Rhine once more, leaving the forests behind. But he left with something more powerful than land. He left with legend. Rome welcomed him with open arms. The Senate praised him. The people adored him. But power is a fragile thing in Rome, and glory is often the first step toward ruin. Germanicus had avenged the dead. He had retrieved Rome's honor, and now he was the most dangerous man in the empire. A prince in the shadow of power. Rome had never seen a homecoming like this. As Germanicus returned from the Germanic front, the streets overflowed with cheers. Laurel wreaths were thrown from balconies. Poets recited verses in his name. Children wore wooden swords, pretending to be the great conqueror. To the people, he wasn't just a general. He was a savior, a living god. But inside the marble palaces of the Palatine Hill, the mood was colder. Tiberius watched in silence, his expression carved from stone. He had given Germanicus honor, command, and fame. But the prince had taken something else, the hearts of the Roman people. And that made him dangerous. Tiberius acted swiftly. He offered Germanicus a new command, governor of the eastern provinces. Officially, it was a reward. In truth, it was exile dressed in gold. The East was far, distant, and full of problems, and more importantly, it was far from Rome. Germanicus accepted without protest. He had no desire for conflict. He brought his family with him, Agrippina, strong and loyal, and their growing children, including the young boy named Gaius. The soldiers had already given him a nickname, Caligula, meaning little boots. In the East, Germanicus worked quickly. He mediated disputes between client kings. He restored order to fractious provinces. He negotiated peace with Parthia, Rome's ancient rival, securing their loyalty with brilliant diplomacy. Wherever he went, stability followed. But so did shadows. Tiberius had planted one, Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso, governor of Syria. Piso was everything Germanicus was not, arrogant, corrupt, and venomously loyal to the emperor. From the moment Germanicus arrived, Piso began undermining him. He reversed orders, insulted allies, and stirred dissent among Roman officials. When Germanicus named new governors, Piso countermanded them. When he negotiated treaties, Piso questioned their legitimacy. It wasn't rivalry, it was sabotage. Germanicus kept his composure. He wrote letters to Rome, detailing Piso's obstruction and the growing tension. No reply came. Tiberius remained silent. That silence spoke louder than any words. Then came the illness. In Antioch, Germanicus collapsed. His skin burned with fever, his stomach twisted in pain, his body weakened each day. Doctors were baffled. Germanicus, once so strong, so full of life, was wasting away. Rumors exploded like wildfire. Had Piso poisoned him? Had spells or dark charms been used? Servants claimed to find cursed objects buried near Germanicus's home, animal bones, blood-stained parchment, fragments of human hair. Whether superstition or truth, the whispers grew louder. This was no illness. It was murder. Agrippina stood watch by his bedside. Germanicus, pale and trembling, called for justice. He believed he had been poisoned by Piso and with Tiberius's blessing. Before his final breath, he made one request, for his wife to return to Rome, show the people his ashes, and demand a reckoning. His voice faded, his body stilled. The Golden Prince was dead, but his story was far from over. Justice denied, revenge ignited. The ashes of Germanicus crossed the seas in silence. Agrippina sailed from Syria with her husband's urn clutched to her chest. Her eyes were hollow, but her spine was steel. Behind her, the East mourned. Ahead, Rome waited, not with answers, but with questions. What had killed the empire's golden prince, and who would pay? The moment her ship landed, the city erupted. Crowds lined the harbor, weeping openly. Senators stripped off their togas in grief. Mothers brought their children to see the widow of Rome's fallen hero. But beneath the mourning, anger smoldered. Germanicus hadn't died of fever. He had been silenced. Agrippina didn't weep. She walked through Rome with her head high and her children at her side. Her very presence was an accusation. She made no speeches. She didn't need to. The people could feel the truth. Piso had returned to Rome too, but not to mourn. He came with swagger, as if victory had followed him from the east. His allies whispered in his ears. His purse was full. He expected protection from Tiberius, but he underestimated the fury of a city in mourning. Agrippina had lit a fire in the Forum. The Senate was forced to act. Piso was summoned to trial, charged with treason, insubordination, and the murder of Germanicus. The trial became the most sensational spectacle of the age. Senators packed the chamber. Citizens gathered outside. Even the gods seemed to watch. Piso defended himself with arrogance. He claimed loyalty to Rome. He blamed Germanicus for his own demise. But the evidence piled high. Letters, testimonies, servants' confessions. The cursed objects found in Germanicus' quarters. Whispers of secret dinners, of poisoned wine. Most damning of all were the unspoken words, that Piso had acted with Tiberius's silent approval. Tiberius remained behind palace walls, untouched, unreachable. He issued vague statements of grief. He praised Germanicus in public, but offered no justice in private. The people saw through it. Murmurs of conspiracy darkened the air. As the trial neared its climax, Piso grew desperate. He begged for mercy. He threatened to reveal secrets, dark truths about the imperial family. And then, without warning, he was found dead in his chamber. The official story: suicide. But Rome knew better. Piso had been silenced, not tried, not judged, just erased. Agrippina watched the Senate close the case. Justice had not been served. The poison had spread deeper than anyone imagined, and now it coursed through the veins of the empire itself. She became more than a widow. She became a symbol. The people rallied around her. Songs were sung of Germanicus's courage. Graffiti appeared across the city walls. Germanicus lives in rage. But Agrippina's greatest weapon wasn't her grief. It was her son, Caligula, the boy who had seen his father buried in foreign soil, the child who had watched his mother demand answers from cowards in togas. He was being shaped in fire, and one day he would return it to Rome tenfold. The Golden Prince was dead, but the legacy he left behind was alive, angry, and waiting. Legacy in blood and fire. The name Germanicus echoed long after his death. In marble halls and on battlefields, he became legend. The man who tamed Germania, who defied corruption, who died a martyr. Statues bore his likeness. Coins carried his image. But the legacy he left behind was more than bronze and stone. It was human, and it burned. Agrippina, his widow, became a lioness. She challenged emperors. She defied Tiberius. She raised her children in defiance, filling their ears with stories of betrayal, glory, and vengeance. Each son carried a scar, but one child, small and silent, absorbed everything: Caligula. Years passed. Tiberius aged in isolation, retreating to his island of Capri, haunted by guilt and ghosts. The Senate grew weaker, the people restless. Then the day came when Tiberius died, alone and unloved, and the boy in the boots returned. Caligula, the heir son of Germanicus, rose to power not just as emperor, but as a storm. The people rejoiced, believing the blood of Germanicus would restore Rome's soul. For a brief moment, it did. He gave games, pardons, and glory. But grief had fermented into madness. The boy who had once walked behind his father's funeral urn became a tyrant cloaked in trauma. Statues of Germanicus stood in every forum, yet his son ruled with terror. Rome had hoped for a savior. It got a shadow. Germanicus died young, betrayed and broken. But in death, he became immortal, a flame that lit revolutions, burned bridges, and forged emperors. His story was not just a tragedy, it was a warning. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Storycraft for more interesting videos.